I had always envisioned marriage as a source of stability and joy. Raised in a modest yet loving home, I carried the values my late parents instilled in me: kindness, humility, and perseverance. Losing them in my teenage years was devastating, but their wisdom continued to guide me. Ethan captivated me from the moment we met in college, charming, driven, and seemingly everything I had ever hoped for. His family, at first glance, seemed welcoming. His mother, Eleanor, greeted me with polite smiles, though her eyes told another story. His father, Gerald, was a man of few words, but his silent disapproval was impossible to ignore. I dismissed my unease, because I loved Ethan. After we married, Eleanor insisted we live at their estate, calling it a temporary arrangement to help us save for a home. It seemed like an act of generosity. I didn't realize I was stepping into a carefully disguised prison. At first, the changes were barely noticeable. Eleanor frequently compared me to the wives of their wealthy acquaintances, women with prestigious careers or inherited fortunes. Olivia hosted a grand charity gala for 300 guests on her own, she mused one evening, her admiration laced with something sharper. Isn't that remarkable, Ethan? It sounds impressive, I replied, forcing a smile. She's a natural at these things, Eleanor continued, her gaze assessing. Not everyone has the background for it. Ethan didn't defend me, he didn't even seem to notice. I convinced myself that ignoring such remarks was easier than confronting them, but things only got worse. Before long, I was treated less like a family member and more like unpaid help. Eleanor left daily lists of chores, pressing linens, polishing silverware, preparing elaborate meals. I complied at first, hoping to earn her approval. No matter how much I did, it was never enough. One evening, after painstakingly preparing a 3-course meal, Eleanor took one sip of her soup and pushed the bowl aside. Too salty, she declared. Redo it tomorrow, and follow the recipe this time. Ethan remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. With him working late most nights, I spent my days alone in a house that felt increasingly suffocating. I thought about picking up painting again, even joining a local art class, but Eleanor dismissed the idea. Your responsibilities are here, she said coolly, there's plenty to keep you busy. It was then that I understood, Eleanor didn't see me as her son's wife, an equal partner. To her, I was an unworthy outsider who had married above my station. Still, I clung to hope. I loved Ethan, surely, he would see how I was being treated and step in, wouldn't he? The breaking point came during a formal dinner. Gerald had invited a business associate, Mr. Hawkins, a man of wealth and influence. Eleanor's instructions were endless. The table must be flawless, she ordered, and please, don't embarrass us in front of Mr. Hawkins. He values sophistication, and you're still learning. Her words stung, but I held my tongue. I set the table with meticulous care. When Mr. Hawkins arrived, I was introduced briefly before being dismissed to the kitchen. As I served hors d'oeuvres, I overheard Gerald comment. She's lucky to be part of this family. Ethan could have married anyone, but he has such a kind heart. The meaning was clear, I was a charity case. Shame burned through me, but I kept my composure. Later that night, as I scrubbed dishes alone in the dim kitchen, silent tears traced down my cheeks. That moment planted something deep inside me, not just sadness, but something stronger, resolve. A week later, Eleanor summoned me, seated gracefully with a teacup in hand, she announced. We'll be hosting Mr. Hawkins again. Gerald has an important deal pending, and we must leave an impeccable impression. I nodded. What do you need me to do? Everything must be perfect, she said smoothly. Then, her gaze flickered over me, and this time, make an effort to look less plain. Presentation is important. Her remark stung, but I swallowed my pride and nodded. As I turned away, it became painfully clear, I wasn't a valued family member. I was merely a pawn in their social ambitions. On the day of the dinner, I worked tirelessly from dawn. The house gleamed, the table was elegantly arranged, and a rich aroma of roasted lamb filled the air. By the time the guests arrived, exhaustion weighed heavily on me. Despite it all, Eleanor insisted I look presentable. When Mr. Hawkins entered, his presence seemed to command the room. He was tall, sharply dressed, with an unmistakable air of authority. His keen eyes swept over the guests, pausing briefly when they landed on me. For a fleeting moment, something flashed across his face, recognition, perhaps surprise, but just as quickly, it was gone. Dinner proceeded smoothly. I served each course, careful to avoid unnecessary attention. As I set a plate before Mr. Hawkins, He looked up and asked, "Thank you, miss, have we met before?" I faltered, caught off guard. I don't believe so." He studied me for a moment. "You look familiar." Before I could respond, Eleanor cut in, her voice sharp. "She's Ethan's wife. She prefers to stay out of the limelight." Mr. Hawkins nodded politely, but his expression remained thoughtful. The evening carried on, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of his lingering gaze. The next morning, while tidying up the dining room, a knock sounded at the front door. Expecting a delivery, I opened it without much thought. To my surprise, it was Mr. Hawkins. "Good morning," he said, his voice even. "May I speak with you?" I hesitated. "Should I get Gerald?" "No," he replied, shaking his head. "I came to see you." Uncertain but curious, I led him into the sitting room. My heart pounded as he sat, his gaze unwavering. I couldn't stop thinking about it. He began, "I know I've seen you before." I frowned. "I don't think so." He pulled out his phone. "Maybe not directly, but does this look familiar?" He turned the screen toward me, and my breath caught. A photograph. My parents, young and beaming, stood beside a much younger Mr. Hawkins at what looked like a formal event. How do you have this?" I whispered. His expression softened. "I was close friends with your parents," he said. "Your father and I worked together. Your mother, she was like a sister to me. When I saw you last night, I couldn't believe it. You're their daughter, aren't you?" Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. "Yes, but they passed away years ago." Mr. Hawkins leaned back, a deep sigh escaping him. His face held a mix of sorrow and relief. "I had no idea. They spoke about you all the time, how proud they were. I lost touch when they moved, and I always regretted it." For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as someone's wife, not as an outsider, but as me. He asked about my life, and though I hesitated at first, his warmth and sincerity chipped away at my walls. "I'm glad I found you," he said finally. "Your parents were remarkable people, and I owe them more than I can express. If you ever need anything at all, you let me know." As he left, his parting words echoed in my mind. "You deserve better than this." Those words didn't just linger, they planted a seed. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking about our conversation over and over again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel entirely alone. Through him, my parents' memory became a tether, grounding me in something real, something I thought I had lost. Eleanor, however, wasn't blind to the shift in me. One morning, as I wiped down the kitchen counters, she appeared beside me, her sharp eyes scanning my face. "You've been awfully quiet," she remarked. "Not that you're much of a talker, but you seem distracted." I forced a small smile. "Just tired." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Well, keep your head straight. We're hosting another dinner next week. Gerald's promotion hinges on impressing Mr. Hawkins." The mention of another dinner sent a familiar dread curling in my stomach. Another night of being ignored, dismissed, paraded like hired help. But then I remembered Mr. Hawkins' words, "You deserve better than this." A few days later, as I walked through the hall, an envelope on the table caught my eye, addressed to me. That alone was unusual. Eleanor and Gerald never acknowledged my mail, let alone left it out for me. Curious, I opened it, my breath hitched. It was a handwritten letter from Mr. Hawkins. I moved through the house carefully that evening, my heart beat a steady drum against my ribs, because tonight would be my last night here. The house buzzed with polite conversation and the sound of crystal glasses clinking together. The guests arrived one by one, their laughter filling the grand dining room, and among them was Mr. Hawkins. He greeted me with a knowing smile, a silent acknowledgement of what we both knew was coming. As expected, Eleanor kept me in the kitchen, ensuring I played the role they had cast for me, but Mr. Hawkins wasn't one to let me stay in the shadows. "Ava," he called as I entered the room with a tray of appetizers, "why don't you join us? We have much to discuss." The room fell into a stunned silence. Eleanor let out a forced laugh. "Oh, that's not necessary, she's here to help, not to dine." Mr. Hawkins' gaze didn't waver, his voice remained calm but firm. "I insist. Ava is like family to me, and I won't have her treated otherwise." Eleanor's face went rigid, the smile slipping as she struggled to maintain control. Gerald shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable, but there was nothing they could do. So, for the first time in my marriage, I took a seat at the table. As dinner progressed, the conversation turned to my parents. Mr. Hawkins shared stories, how my father had been his closest friend, how my mother's kindness left a mark on everyone she met. For the first time in years, they didn't feel like distant memories. Through his words, they were here with me. And then, he dropped the bombshell. "Ava," he said, his voice steady, "have you told them about the trust fund your parents left for you?" The room went still, my breath caught in my throat. Across the table, Eleanor and Gerald's expressions shifted from confusion to shock. "Trust fund?" Gerald repeated, his voice stiff with disbelief. "Yes, Mr. Hawkins said, his eyes flickering between them. Her parents set up a substantial fund to ensure she'd never have to depend on anyone, and yet, here we are." Eleanor recovered first, her voice sugary sweet but edged with panic. We had no idea. She never mentioned it. I met her gaze evenly for the first time that night. "Because you never asked." Tension thickened in the air. Gerald let out a nervous chuckle. "Well, this is just a mix-up. Of course, Ava will have access to her funds, right, Eleanor?" But Eleanor's mask cracked. "She's ungrateful," she snapped, her voice sharp with anger. "After everything we've done, giving her a home, food, this is how she thanks us?" Mr. Hawkins leaned forward, his voice unyielding. "If by giving her a home and food, you mean taking advantage of her and treating her like a servant, then yes, Eleanor, this is how she thanks you, by reclaiming her life." For once, Eleanor was speechless. Gerald sagged in his chair, all his usual bluster gone. After dinner, I retrieved the small bag I had packed earlier. The moment I stepped toward the door, Mr. Hawkins was by my side. "I have a place ready for you," he said quietly. "Let's go." Neither Eleanor nor Gerald stopped me. They must have realized the truth. Whatever hold they had over me was gone. As I stepped out of that house for the last time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The next morning, I woke up in my own apartment, small, modest, but mine. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I started attending workshops at a nonprofit, learning skills to build my future. Mr. Hawkins guided me through accessing my trust fund, encouraging me to explore paths I had never considered. Most importantly, I found myself again. I was no longer a pawn in someone else's life, no longer someone's burden, no longer someone's charity case. I was Ava, a woman with a future. Months later, I sat in a quiet cafe, sipping coffee, a book in hand. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The weight of my past had lifted, replaced with hope. I thought of my parents, not with grief, but with gratitude. They had given me strength, and now, I was finally living the life they had dreamed for me. As for Eleanor and Gerald? I heard through the grapevine that Gerald didn't get his promotion. Seems karma has a way of setting things right. But they were no longer my concern. My future lay ahead of me. And I was ready to embrace it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay tuned.